Yep.
Good evening. Welcome all. We're coming to a meeting on a beautiful evening. I'm impressed. This is the meeting of the Board of Trustees, Plymouth Community Schools, May 6, 2015. If you'll join us in the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin with our normal agenda, the process this evening, first meeting with a new board member, Jenny Sickmiller, we need to have the oath of office. So,
if you'll please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the State of Indiana, the laws of the United States and the State of Indiana, and will you faithfully execute the duties of your office as a member of this governing body, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
we'll turn the meeting over to Jenny. Welcome
Give me a
aboard.
couple months.
Yeah.
Please.
Welcome and great addition.
Thank you.
Next item is to set the agenda. Any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Nope.
Entertain a motion then to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions?
I just comment, I know Lynn Dotson's retiring, and I would certainly want to thank Lynn for her contributions, dedication to Webster Elementary, and wish her all the best in the retirement.
Lost track. We have a motion and second. All in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 1.4, audience participation. Again, thank you for coming. Are there items on the agenda this evening that anyone would like to speak to? If not, we'll have an opportunity near the end of the meeting as well. The consent agenda is next, which contains a listing of traditional items we find on the consent agenda. Are there any items, we have a number of trips as well that are presented for our consideration. Are there any items that board members would like to pull out and consider separately? Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on any of the consent agenda items? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, business transactions. 3.1, focus on learning. This evening we have representation, quite a bit it looks like, from Lincoln Junior High.
We do. I'd just like to welcome 3 different groups of our students, our 7th and 8th grade students that are here to talk about their digital portfolios and their language arts work. They will introduce themselves as they come up.
Hi, my name is Samantha Ezekiel. I'm a 7th grader at Lincoln.
Hi, I'm Olivia Clark. I'm a 7th grader at Lincoln. I'm Katie Smith, and I'm also a 7th grader at Lincoln.
I will go ahead and speak about my portfolio first. It's the very last one that you see there on the tab here. Okay. Wow, this takes hand-eye coordination. Okay, so this is my e-portfolio. It helps me to focus on my schoolwork and be able to post things about my life, things I'm interested in as well, and get feedback from kids maybe in other states, other countries even, that we've blogged with. It helps me keep organized with my schoolwork. I can post things I've been working on and use it to record any major projects or writing or anything big I've done with my life. So I'll go ahead and show you my profile tab here. This basically just has some stuff about me. I don't know how I did that. It has a picture of my little cousin, a picture of soccer because I love to play soccer, and just some other things, basics about me. And then there's tabs I use for schoolwork. So, for example, on my math tab, I have a word cloud that I created with a funny little joke as we were studying pi and learning the digits of it. And then there's also projects I've done. This is a link to my Bullying Upstanders page. Yes. All three of us happen to be in this group. We did an autism campaign. You can see a fun picture of all of us right there at the autism campaign with our entire school. And a little brief summarization of what we did there. And then that just basically has, like, it's helped us be able to create blogs, other types of blogs, with using the same or different browsers for it and tools, but be able to create blogs for other things like our Upstanders group, or we give that to Rod.
Just hit your plus sign down. Just type it back in.
Aren't you over there?
That's a different Samantha.
Oh.
Just type it right
How do I type?
If you go to history,
Up at the
up at the
top.
top.
I know it's kind of awkward up at the top. It's kind of odd.
Here, Katie.
Somebody else put that.
Sure, there you go. There you go. Bowling, there you go.
I don't use this browser. Okay, so back to my portfolio. This is a link to another thing because you can kind of link tabs into it. When you click on a tab, it'll open up another blog that you've created. So this is another thing I did, Garments for Goodwill. It's a project through Genius Hour that we do through Ms. Neidlinger's class. Just kind of another benefit of having an e-portfolio. And basically, for the most part, I mean, it just helps you be able to feel like you have a place to put everything and keep everything organized. It's all in the same place. You can go to one place and everything's just there. Any questions you'd like to ask me?
Good job.
Okay.
Hi. Mine's right here. And this is my home screen. Let's see it. Well, I feel that the e-portfolio helps us later on in life. It benefits us because this also, like Sam said, is a place where we can document everything that we've done. You can see my stuff. That's okay. Oh, thank you. We do student blogging challenges to connect with other students throughout the world, actually, different countries. Just some stuff that we do. Like once a week, we do a blogging challenge. And I feel that this can help us connect with other students wherever they are. And then this can, like I said, this is a place where we can document everything we did. And if people wanted to see us on the internet, how we are socially, this would be a great place for them to come and see what we've done, accomplished, and everything else.
I have a question. You mentioned the ability to connect with students all over the world. How much of that goes on?
Quite a bit a day, but I honestly don't get on every single night and like blog with them. I should do it more. But blogging can be whenever you want. You just type in their website, or here's a link that Ms. Neidlinger has for us, and we type in their website, go on, see what they have, and then we always make sure that we leave our website so they can come back to ours and view ours.
What country recently?
A lot of Australia and a couple New Zealand, a lot of America too.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't want to come up here and talk about the exact same thing that they both talked about. So I'm going to focus on one part of my blog, which I like a lot, and it was just like my past goals from the beginning of the year, and then reading about other goals. I think it was cool because I got to see what I wanted to do, which is like succeed in math and become a teacher, which is funny because now I want to be a dentist. And I actually have a 171% in math, so I kind of accomplished one of my goals. And it's just a good way to see how you've grown over time, because like everybody changes and it's crazy. And that's my turn of thought now. I've actually like learned a lot about kids, like not even from other like countries, but also in my own school that I usually don't talk to, like through their blogs. Like they've commented on my blog and then said like, hey, go check out mine, and I did, and actually learned a lot about somebody, and I'm trying to track them down, but I just can't find them. And yeah, and another benefit of our blogging challenges that we do is just like learning other 2.0 tools and tech tools that will help us like in high school and in college with presenting and stuff like that. So yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Very cool.
Thank you.
I am Kate Reneker, and I'm in 7th grade.
And I am Jillian Robertson, and I am in 7th grade as well.
Okay, well, here's my blog. I post a lot about my life, and it's a way to share what I do and what I'm interested in with other people around the world, and I get to see what they like to do and what they're about. So, I've just, like, I recently moved, and I have some of this. I changed jeans hours, and then we have these cool blogging challenges. One that Miss Niner made that we did, and they've talked about it too. But I really found new interest in this. Like, I didn't know that much about Pompeii until I read somebody else's blog, and I'm really interested in it. Like, I find myself thinking about that all the time. I also find this a good way to post things about what I do in class. So, like I have my social studies. I put a lot of my do nows in here, just like answers to this. Like here, like it was a question of who would I have dinner with one person. It was Anne Frank. And I also have a science one. I recently had a project to do. It's probably so late, but so I posted that on it. So if anybody wants to know about earthquakes, there you go. We also do a lot of reflecting for Genius Hour. Like we recently have some reflections on here. So, and this is my, I was going to do Genius Hour, but I changed it recently. And that's about it. And also, I like how we get to express ourselves through the blogs. So, like, I have, an about me, goals. I look back on them, and, like, I find that I completed a lot of them, and I'm really proud of myself. So, like, I'm a vegetarian. Yeah, I highlighted in green. I got a lot better grades, than I did at my other school that I went to. and I feel more successful at school. And I got into jazz band, and I made a lot more friends than I did at my other school, and it was a lot awesome.
Okay, I warn everybody now, I cannot see very well, so she's gonna help me and stuff. Okay, which one's mine? Okay, this is my blog. I am a writer. I write different books for myself, and this is definitely a good way to keep on to progress for writing and get your ideas down and have other people look at them and say, ooh, that'd be interesting to read about. And I absolutely love feedback from different people after I have written my stories. And being a writer, this also helps me expand my vocab and my grammar, my spelling, because most teachers getting up in the grades, they expect you to be able to spell better, to use higher vocab. They expect you to do that. And using this, it helps me make sure I am checking myself for higher words and things that can get me higher up. Our blogging challenges also, I'm going to add on to a bit she said, they allow us to get with other students and talk and learn about different things like Pompeii. They can actually start different interests, and I have actually come up with for my Genius Hour, using these blogs, I came up with the idea to do a depression website, and it's linked on there. And the depression website is basically, I read an article on someone else's blog, and I found it really interesting, but really sad at the same time, and I found out that a lot of teenagers end up committing suicide at the end, and it was just terrible. So I decided to do an awareness for my Genius Hour, and it actually turned out pretty well. And it all came off of this blog. The reason that I've helped so many people, the reason that I've come up with so many great ideas, all comes off of this. And it helps students to become more creative and more based on learning. Well, that's my opinion. It also helps for keeping track of different things you're learning. Like, let's say I learned something in social studies. We all have different tabs for different subjects that we can put our information into. That way, if we have like a test or a quiz or something coming up in the following week, all we have to do is look back on our blog and review it, and we've got it down. And it makes it easier to make sure we have everything that we need and make sure that everything is right down there, and it's easy to look at, it's easy to read, and it's basically like notes. So it's a digital organizer, pretty much, and it helps a lot when it comes to school and like jobs and things like that. This, going into jobs and stuff, if you end up doing something special on these blogs, you could end up finding that you're actually doing something pretty cool, and it could end up going on like your college degree or something, and or not degree, resume or whatever, and it can help you with jobs, and it can help you learn different things that you're interested in and help you make better decisions.
Very good.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samantha Payne, and I'm an 8th grader.
My name is Trey Heckman, and I'm also an 8th grader.
Okay, we've learned a lot of things with these e-portfolios. Actually, recently, which you can see right here, we've learned to utilize 2.0 tools, which is like we've learned how to put videos in and presentations by embedding things into the HTML. And I plan on continuing my website into like high school and everything, because it's basically like a map, because you can go back and look at everything that I've done since this point. Like, see, I've got some math projects on here, and got science and social studies specials. And also this year we've done Genius Hour, which since I had already learned how to make a blog, I was able to make a blog for my Genius Hour project. So that was cool. And like the others said, we've learned to we've communicated with people from other countries. Like, I've had a lot of page views from Malaysia, which I know nothing about people from Malaysia. So that was really cool to see that 200 people from Malaysia found my blog interesting. All of us have a guest book, which is not showing up for some reason, but it's like a survey on our blogs, and we all have the profiles too. And I like the idea that when I go to college or when I apply for a job, that if they can come here and they can literally see how I've grown as a person and intellectually since this point. Like, I plan to update it maybe even past high school. I'm not sure where this is going to go. But I just think that that's really cool. And it's taught me a lot of things that I didn't even know about. Because we've had a new challenge for our blogging challenges. Every once in a while, like this one, what's all the blogging about? And I chose to write about how reading influenced me and that stuff. And we actually had to write a story, and we had to post it. The 8th graders did on ours.
I wasn't familiar with the process, and then I read your story and thought that it was actually your life. I didn't realize that you were writing a story, and it talks about an accident that takes place when a family's coming home from Colorado, and I thought it was your family until I got to the end and realized that it was a
Yeah, it's
project
all
based
fiction.
on one picture. That's really neat.
Yeah, she gave us a choice of pictures, actually, and you had to choose a picture and write a story about it. And I chose enough things from my real life to incorporate into it so it did feel realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the characters are based on my family and all that stuff. Because I feel like that's the best type of writing, is when you incorporate yourself into the characters and people that you know into the characters.
You did a really good job.
Thanks. Okay, and I think that's about all I've got to talk about this. I'm like trying to strain myself to find more topics, but yeah.
This is my e-portfolio. I will go ahead and talk about the student blog challenge first, and kind of go on the topics that some of the other people have talked about. This is the student blog challenge that we did with other students around the world. Our newest challenge was something that Ms. Manlinger created, which I have just been making posts on my homepage. My most recent post was we were learning how to utilize 2.0 tools. So I went ahead and did Animoto, which is you can create your videos, you add pictures and sounds, and I have more blog challenges coming down. How will this help me later on in high school and college? The connecting with students around the world, I feel has been a really big help to find interest in others and learn more about other people. My Genius Hour, which is another project we have going on in human arts. So my Genius Hour project is actually to create a place. I actually have another blog that I created, a place for students to go and learn about aviation. That's one of my passions. And using this later on in high school and college, I think as as you can see, I have my subject tabs, math, science, social studies, band specials, and I feel that's a good place to put my projects. I have uploaded multiple projects from FACS class, and I feel like they said it's a good way to keep organized and add stuff that you have done. And I like the idea that someone said it was a map, so you can go back and look what you've done. And I actually have quite a few page views from kids all around the world. One of the biggest countries besides America is actually Turkey. I think I have over 100 page views from Turkey. So I found that to be very interesting. And I didn't even know how to create a blog. Actually, that was something new I learned this year. And using all these 2.0s and creating blogs and different websites, I even just create websites and blogs for fun now because I learned how to do it, and I think it's a good way to keep learning. So creating this e-portfolio has definitely helped me, and I do continue to keep using it throughout my educational
I have a question though. On your blogs, do people ever get critical of things that you post on your blog? And what do you do about that?
We tell a teacher, and they are able to either tell the teacher that the student, because usually you can tell who the student is and where the teacher is, and they can like moderate it and delete the comment.
Delete the comment? Okay. All right, good.
I just want to add to that. If it's something really critical, like hurtful, meant to be hurtful, that would be what would happen. But if it's just a little critical, constructive criticism, then we would take it into consideration the next time we were able to do a project or whatever type of thing that they were commenting on, and hope it would make us better.
Very interesting.
Well, thank you all very much. That was very interesting. It's great to see what you guys are doing, and I can't help but think how different things have changed over the years, and really excited about the learning that you guys are picking up. So, and I do agree, your family's got a lot of characters, so that's a great story to. Any other comments?
I think it's neat, very interesting, and it's a tremendous challenge.
Paula, was there anything you wanted to add, or? I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay.
I didn't plan to talk. No, I mean, I think they did a great job, and I really wanted it to come from them, what they thought, and I think they spoke well of really what they've been doing and how they feel it's impacted their learning, so I think they did a great job.
I think it's a great idea to maintain, as you guys mentioned, and look back and see how you've grown over time. And, you know, as I try to do that over the years, all I have are pieces of paper that don't make a lot of sense. So this is a great tool for you guys, so keep it up. Keep it up. That's awesome. Thank you all for being here.
Very good, thank you.
We are going to go on to the rest of our meeting, which I'm sure is what you all paid for. I'm going to pause for a couple minutes if you want to go and get your homework done and start watching.
Good job,
Thank
guys.
The other side, before coming in now. Yeah, good, because it's like, yeah, it's just. Is it really? Yeah. No, not even this. Usually just Carol is our table. Carol's always here. We can count Carol. Good evening, you guys.
All right.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, it's-
I know, you've been there, done that, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to move on to 3.2, as may be obvious, which is a report on from the facility study group. Before we do that, and I meant to say this at the beginning of the meeting, obviously Dan, our superintendent's not with us this evening. Michelle and Reese, Dan, Preston are certainly capable, more than capable of carrying us forward. But Dan, I spoke to Dan earlier today, doing pretty well, so we'll welcome him back when he's able. So, yeah.
Yeah, so last fall, if you remember, before our school board embarked on some strategic planning, we had some community meetings, had some parents in, actually in the boardroom here, and out of that came a desire to maybe further study where we are with facilities, and so we contracted with administrative assistants, and Ed and John have spent a lot of time up here studying our schools, and a lot of time with Dave going through the buildings, and they're here tonight to give us their report. So, John and Ed.
Thank you. My name is Ed Eiler, and in a former life, I had the opportunity to enjoy lots of school board meetings, so it's nice to be back. Appreciate the opportunity to have worked with the board in the strategic planning and have appreciated the assistance of everyone in the school district and looking at your facilities in Plymouth and trying to satisfy something which, in talking with Dan, we are not here to make a recommendation to you of what you should do. Our task was to provide information for you, some tools that you can use, some options you may want to look at, a frame of reference. And while we were not about to tell you what to do, we certainly do have some suggestions about perhaps some things you might consider as you go about the process in terms of how you do it. So we have some information to share with you this evening. I hope that the information that we share with you is information that will be helpful to you as a community in making a decision that you are best situated to make. You live here, you understand a lot about the community, and you're best positioned to make the decisions that need to be made. And this evening you're going to see quite a few numbers. And the first thing I have to share with you is that people don't make decisions based upon numbers. Ultimately, you're going to be using other factors than just the numbers, but you also need some data as a part of your decision-making process. We looked at this particular problem from the perspective of having been through this multiple times in our own experience and the kinds of things that one looks at in trying to come to some closure in terms of what to do in terms of a long-term facility plan. The critical driver of every conceivable facilities plan deals with some idea of what's going to happen to your enrollment, and we'll talk about that. So we've examined enrollment. We've looked at building capacities in terms of the number of students that the building could reasonably be expected to accommodate. We've looked at and talked and met with a number of groups from your community in terms of focus groups. We've listened to it in terms of the facility and program needs that these focus groups have communicated to us as a third party. We looked at the condition of your buildings, and we've identified some options. It's certainly not intended to be the only options for you to think about. And we've examined some costs and financing, and we will probably summarize all the things that we have to say. So I'd like to begin with a discussion about enrollment. And if somebody comes in this room and tells you, I can tell you what your enrollment's going to be in 12 years, they're not being very honest with you, because it is such a complex task to try to anticipate what the enrollment is going to be. And no other point of information or data is more critical to your decision-making process than what your enrollment is going to be. That is the driver, because it tells you how many buildings you need, what square footage you need. It is the determining factor that governs everything else. Just to give you some idea of the reason why it is so complex to try to estimate enrollment. Some of the things that is happening right now in terms of there are pluses and minuses that are working forward against the community with reference to enrollment. You have new language in the legislature that provides for the ability of students to make transfers between public schools, provided that the school districts are amenable to it. There are now vouchers that go to private schools, and you have a parochial school in your community. You also have, I think, a funding formula which now forcing small districts and giving them no option but to consider merging. So in the future, there will be some mergers of smaller districts. You also have the economic climate. And the economic climate works a couple of ways. I recently did a study in looking at the impact of the property tax caps on school districts. And what you'll find in some communities is they've been greatly impacted by property tax caps because the primary employer has left the community and has demolished the facility. This has a dramatic impact upon the community. Now, if you can tell me which employers are going to remain in our community forever, or what new ones are going to come, that would be helpful. But that's a part of the mix. You also, Plymouth is not fully built out. So that means that there is still opportunity for some areas within your school district to have housing development. And so will that be developed? If so, when, how many units are we talking about? And then you have the mobility of population, because in tough economic times, people find that living really way out of a community in which you now have to pay LP gas, you have to cross the gasoline to drive to and from work. There tends to be some consideration to consolidate back to the city until times get better, then they move back out of the city. You have all of these things that are at play. The other thing that you have is what kind of data are you going to use to make your prediction about kindergarten? Because kindergarten is the driver in many of the enrollment projections, because you use a technique which is a cohort survival method to kind of guesstimate your enrollment. The problem is where the children are born, how those records are maintained, and getting that information. It is very, very difficult to parse that out and say, okay, that's the percentage of all the live births and from these hospitals in these counties that wind up in your schools in kindergarten. So an alternative method is to look at using a 3-year average of a cohort as your beginning kindergarten number, which is what we chose to do. What's interesting is we did this enrollment projection when we first talked, met with Dan, and we did it for the 13-14 school year. And you'll note that we guesstimated a kindergarten enrollment of 308. Your actual enrollment was 305, so using a 3-year cohort wasn't too bad of a tool to estimate. Listing it by 3 is not too bad. But you just see the inherent problem in terms of using this kind of technique, because you have your total enrollment projection for the 13-14 year was 3710 when your actual enrollment was 3750. So it's slightly underestimated it using that technique. And we made some modifications because we know you have a parochial school. We looked at the enrollments as kids are leaving that institution at this point in time and the impact, and so we made some adjustments in those numbers. But we also looked at playing around hypothetically. If you have a housing development, for example, we gave you a tool to look at the instrument that we use basically says that for every 3 new single-family dwellings, you get 2 children. For every 5 multifamily units, you get 3 children. For senior housing, you don't get any children. So, assuming that you had a development that maybe had 50 single-unit houses and 150 multifamily houses, we just kind of played around with those kind of numbers and said, okay, if those were the numbers, what impact did that have upon you and so forth? And our conclusion from the enrollment data is that I think it is safe to say for the community in Plymouth, the good news is I think you're at least stable, and if you are a betting person, I think there are so many more of those factors that are working in your favor than are working against you, that I would anticipate you'll probably have some slight growth in enrollments. So it's not, I would plan for some slight growth of enrollment is a reasonable assumption. Again, to think that you can plan this out 12, 13, 20 years ahead, I don't think if anybody's intellectually honest with you that they can do that. But I do think it's safe to say that I think there are more factors working for you than against you, and I think that's clear from the fact that just from the survival cohort, you're looking at 3710, and this year you have 3,750 students. So it does indicate that some of those factors may be working in your favor. So that's the first assumption, which is a good assumption, because one of the things that means is within the foreseeable future of 10 to 12 years, you're not going to be confronted with worrying about closing the school, which a lot of communities have to worry about. So that's the good news. The next thing that one does when you're trying to look at facilities is to look at the capacity of the buildings. And you have to look at capacity from a couple of different perspectives. One is, how many students can you physically house in a single classroom? And then, are there some other things about the building that limits the actual number of children that you may wish to put in that building, even though it may accommodate perhaps more children, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But several years ago, there was a division of schoolhouse planning, and the division of schoolhouse planning was set out for school districts certain minimal requirements for square footage. And what they indicated was it required 30 square feet per student in a classroom. That was the standard. The Division of Schoolhouse Planning was eliminated by the legislature, but it is still an awfully good standard to use when you look at capacity, because that is a reasonable amount of square footage that's often used in looking at capacity. Ideally, what you try to do is to say, we would like the classrooms used at about an 85% capacity. That would be ideal. And the reason that's ideal is that allows you for fluctuation of enrollment. You can have an increase in enrollment, you're okay. You have a decrease in enrollment, you're still okay. You also then have decision points. Once your capacity of a building gets above 90%, you need to look at whether or not you can solve the problems of that by perhaps redrawing attendance areas, or if it's really, really out of whack in terms of you've got 120% or whatever, it may demand looking at new construction for something. Or if the enrollment capacity falls below 70%, again, you look at, do we need to redraw attendance areas in order to balance the enrollment, or do we need to possibly look at closing a school? Those are the kinds of decisions that you make based upon the capacity of the buildings. When you look at the capacity of the buildings, again, and we're just talking about physical capacity to house students, looking at the capacity of each of your elementary schools and intermediate school and junior high school, you look at ideally where you'd like to be in terms of enrollment numbers and where your current enrollment at those districts. At Jefferson, you're about 59%. At Menominee, you're 72%. At Washington, 95%. At Webster, you're 87%. In terms of your whole elementary enrollment, you're at about 77% capacity. It's not 85, but it's reasonably, it's a good percentage of capacity. At Riverside, you're about 92%, and at Lincoln, it's 112%, and that's primarily because of the small classrooms that are at Lincoln, and that is a fundamental problem. And we talked about, can you physically locate that many children in that building? The answer is yes. But just as you could accommodate more children at Jefferson, you've already decided from a functional standpoint, we're only going to put 281 kids there. Part of the reason is because of the functionality of the cafeteria and gymnasium. You're not willing to pay the prices that you would have to pay to accommodate more kids. And the way you accommodate more kids at that building are things you don't probably want to do. And that is, for example, is it possible for kids to eat in their classroom and have an aide or somebody supervise them while they eat in their classroom and have satellite lunches, do all that? Yeah, you could. Could we eliminate some grades that have PE? Yeah, you could. Do you want to do that? Not really. Those are what we talk about, functional capacity, and only the school district and school community can decide, okay, what is the limit of functional capacity, because are we willing to have kids eat in their classroom? Are we willing to eliminate some PE in order to just accommodate more kids in that building? That's kind of what we talk about in terms of functional capacity. So we looked at the capacity of the buildings. And then we had the opportunity to have a number of meetings with focus groups in the community where we listened to community input on facilities and programs. And I'm going to turn it over to John to let him share a little bit of what we heard from those focus groups.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, with a variety of groups, they'll have very many positive comments from people, so you're to be commended for that. Not only positive about the way the buildings are maintained, but also the programs that are being offered. One of the things that did come up was preschool. Of course, preschool is new on the horizon, and we didn't take any time to say what's the future of preschool for Plymouth schools. That's something you will have to wrestle with and deal with, but that, depending on what direction you take with preschools, that will impact your facilities and your capacities. That was not a part of the consideration as we went through the study. Common operational concerns came from, there were some concerns about class sizes in the lower elementary schools, and the proper role of technology. Is technology being infused in instruction or used correctly? And are they able to provide effective additional assistance to students who need it? Are your facilities providing the adequate capacity for those kinds of things? And are your curricular offerings meeting the needs of your students? Also, the focus groups did indicate that there was a desire to examine a balanced calendar. I don't know where you all are with that, but that was a topic that came up from several of the focus groups. Great deal of discussion about offering foreign languages in the elementary school. Felt like there was a need for the younger students to get involved in foreign language education. There was a substantial difference of opinion regarding the need to upgrade school buildings. One of the concerns that I think we felt, maybe it isn't a concern, but one of the things we felt was you are doing an excellent job of maintaining your facilities. As we drive by, and quite honestly, as I drive by your buildings, they look terrific from the outside. The public forms a quick opinion on how things look from the outside, and you've been doing a terrific job of that. You've been doing a good job maintaining from the inside, but many times infrastructures are failing that you can't see from the outside driving down the street. You also, because you're working hard at maintaining those things, I don't think the children are going home and saying to mom and dad, our school's awful, the air condition doesn't work, the heat doesn't work, they're a problem. So certainly you're to be commended for maintaining your buildings, but I don't know that the public senses there's a real need for upgrading the facilities that maybe you feel or does exist. There was agreement on the odor problem at Lincoln Junior High School. I think we heard that from nearly every focus group, that the junior high school, there were occasions where there were issues with that sewer system. A number of issues were raised that can be addressed through capital projects plans so that they can be fixed without a full-blown building program. There were some safety concerns raised, and we know that you're doing a great deal of work on school safety, and you're doing a really fantastic job of trying to protect your children and doing the right thing for their safety. And many of those changes that need to be made in the existing facilities can be made through capital projects planning. There were multiple respondents that made a reference to a concern of a lack of a swimming pool, that there is no longer a pool in the district, and that came from numerous focus groups. There were also some comments about the lack of athletic facilities from Jefferson, especially for junior high students. Commitment to project-based learning and New Tech High School, you are doing a great deal of upgrading, and have done a great deal of upgrading Plymouth High School for New Tech High School, and people were pleased with that. You do have a commitment in doing a terrific job of that, and it felt like those facilities certainly were in great shape, and plans were in place to keep moving forward with that. Additional considerations, your district is well positioned to accommodate your students enrolled in grades K through 6 with the new elementary. You certainly don't have a facility shortage of space. At the same time, you've recently invested in the high school. You're committed to making existing facility needs for grades 9 through 12. Final considerations, the facility and grade levels where the greatest need existed, and this came from nearly every focus group. The greatest consideration needs to be for Lincoln Junior High School. The functional capacity at Lincoln just needs to be determined, and you decide where you're going with that. One of the other things that we looked at, and this table gives you an idea of the age of your buildings. I'm currently working with another district right now, and their new high school was built in 1967. And sometimes in communities, we think of those as that's the new high school. The district where I was superintendent, we built a new elementary school in 1986. And the people are still talking about, well, the new elementary. And if you look at the years that your buildings were first occupied, certainly Menominee is a new school. But you have a building at Lincoln that was first occupied in 1926. You've had some improvements in that building. Plymouth High School was first occupied in 1961. And I would almost venture to say that there are a few folks in Plymouth yet to think of that as a new high school in Plymouth. But you have done some remodeling in those buildings. We've done some major renovations of some of those buildings, but one of the things we wanted to look at was 6 years down the road, because I think there has been a 2020 vision of some sort in the community plan, and in 2020, what will those buildings look like age-wise, where are they going to be? And if you look at those, the age of Jefferson will be 69 years of age, Menominee will be 14 years old, Washington will be 51 years old, Webster will be 50, Riverside will be 26, and Lincoln, depending on which part of Lincoln you're in, because you have done renovation and remodels on that, it'll be anywhere from 52 to 94 years of age. And Plymouth High School will be 59 years of age at that point in time. So part of it is thinking forward. We need to think about what the age of facilities are going to be 6 years from now, 6 quick years from now, and you can see that you're going to have some age there. There are also the age of the improvements. Some of those improvements then are going to show some age. And there then is a chart that shows the acreage that you have at each of those sites. You do have the good fortune of having a great deal of acreage, that as you look at possibilities or you have to take some consideration of what you might do down the road, you do have some acreage that you can work with. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Eiler for some options.
Because people have a tendency to latch onto an option because it's labeled A or their favorite color or whatever. I tried diligently to come up with some description of the options, to try to neutralize that, so we pick colors all that start with the letter B. That doesn't mean that one's better than the other, we just kind of come up with something that gives you names of some options. When you look at the options, an option would be to look at remodeling the existing junior high school. That's obviously an option. The most compelling need appears to be at 7th and 8th grade facility. If you were to remodel it, the advantage of doing that is you did make an investment in the building in 1986. It does allow you to fully realize that investment that you made in 1986. Frankly, that's about the only advantage that I can come up with, but that's an advantage. The disadvantage of doing that is, if you've ever done that, it is extraordinarily disruptive to the educational process to try to renovate the building and hold school at the same time. You can be guaranteed that you're going to have to probably put some additional temporary classrooms on the site, because that's the only way you're going to have school. And I think when you get it all done, the problem with Lincoln is that those walls and those things that support them, you can't move them because they're load bearing. It was built at a period of time when you just don't move those walls, and so you're stuck with the classroom sizes as they are, because you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with the moving of the interior of the building. Anytime you have a facility like that, it isn't a nightmare for an architect, but let's just say sets forth a number of challenging issues for the architects to try to deal with when you try to remodel with that kind of facility that has had that many renovations. And the possibility of running into a number of unforeseen conditions is a real possibility, and unforeseen conditions usually mean additional cost. The other reality is that when you get done with the whole project of remodeling the building, you will have portions of the building that have a shorter life expectancy than the parts that you've chosen to remodel and renovate. And so it's not all at the same point in terms of the age of the facility. And if you put it on the same site and you were just merely remodeling it, you're kind of giving away some of the options you may have with reference to trying to resolve some of the traffic issues that you have currently at the building. But that is an option, is to remodel the existing building. Another option would be to build a new junior high school for grades 7 and 8. The advantage of doing that is it's much easier to design the building. It's much easier to construct the building. And you will not disrupt the educational programs while that is being constructed. And you will wind up with more efficient use of the classroom space, and it better addresses the whole issue of capacity with reference to grades 7 and 8. And it allows you probably to address some of the traffic flow issues that you have, given how you can set the building on the site and deal with the traffic flow issues. The disadvantages are the fact that you'll have the additional cost of demolishing the old building. So there's an additional cost. Would also require the community to accept the fact that you're going to demolish that building. And lastly, you have this new law passed by the Indiana legislature that says once that you no longer use a school building as a school building, you must make it available for 2 years to a charter school to purchase, and I think it is for a nominal amount of money. I talked with Dave Emmert from the Indiana School Boards Association about this problem, and basically this is something which the legislature, the law does not contemplate. Clearly, if you're going to remodel and renovate the building, you can clearly demolish a considerable part of it and renovate the rest of it, add on to a wing or whatever. But if it's the entire building, and if you put that as a part of your plan, that its demolition is a part of the plan, whether that satisfies what is required by the statute, or do you still must allow it to be made available or not? Given the time frame in which you're looking at, I mean, if you were to decide today, if we're going to build a brand new building and we're going to go take it to voters, you're not going to probably proceed with this for 2.5 years, okay? So it's not something you're gonna do immediately. Dave's opinion was this will probably be something which may be settled law, because you're not the only school district that would look at whether or not you have to demolish a building to build the new building. But it does call into question, and it is something which I've talked with Mr. Chris Harrison, Indiana Association of School Business Officials, and said, this is something the legislature should address in terms of clarifying the law when you're looking at demolishing the building on the same site and building a new building, because the law is not clear. And I think that it is something which I think you should work with if you pursue this, if you think this is a serious option, you need to talk about with your local legislators about the lack of clarity in the law, and see if there can't be some wording that's added to the current statute which addresses this specific situation, because you're not alone. You're not the only school district that's confronting this. And while I did not say this, I must tell you how I think, and that is, it doesn't say what happens if you demolish the building. There isn't any penalty if you demolish the building, so I don't know if it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, but it doesn't say that there's any penalty if you demolish the building, so I don't know exactly where that puts you. One other option which is a little tricky, but we did also talk about through this out, what if the building were condemned? Would you then be in a position to be able to demolish the building? And Mr. Emmer thought that was an interesting concept. So I don't know if you get to that point whether you could possibly have the building condemned, but that's also something else that you might actually think about. So that's option bronze. B would be to convert the current 5-6 intermediate building to a junior high school and build a new 4-5-6 intermediate school. The only reason that is an option. Now you have to decide whether that's a good option, bad option, whatever. It's an option. The advantage of doing that, it takes care of any concern about the ability for the district to accommodate possible enrollment in grades K to 6 by adding that 4-5-6 intermediate building. You can build it to the size that you think that you need it. It does provide the ability to add space for grades 7 and 8 at the same location if needed at some later date if it's designed properly. The disadvantages, again, it's extremely disruptive to remodel an existing building and try to conduct school, and at the same time you've got the same issues that you have elsewhere. You're going to have to add some temporary classrooms, and you're going to have to not only pay for the cost of remodeling that building, but pay for the cost of building a new building. And the very distinct possibility that if your enrollment doesn't grow any more than we anticipate that it would, there's a very distinct possibility that you would wind up with more space than the district actually needs, and it's very difficult to justify that. And it raises the same issue as, okay, then if you do that, what do you do with the existing Lincoln junior high school building? Option beige is a spin-off of the previous option in which you say, okay, we'll remodel the 5-6 building, make it 7-8, but we'll just build a 5-6 building one location, but we'll add a wing to one of the other elementaries that is not Jefferson, because you have no place on that site to do anything. That would accomplish essentially the same thing as the previous set of previous option would. And it basically has the same disadvantages. The only difference is instead of building a 4-5-6 building, you're building a 5-6 building and adding a wing to one of the other elementaries. And that would be if you want to make sure that you want to keep K to, if your organizational grade structure you want to keep is K to 4 and 5-6, but still accommodate some additional students because you think you're going to have them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've already talked about that.
Yeah, but you can laugh with it.
That was a trick question.
That was, yeah, just making sure you all were still with me. The burgundy option is you could add a grade level. If you're really concerned about enrollment, what's going to happen in K-6, you can add a wing to one of the other elementary grades. That would address that problem, but it does not address the issues in grades 7 and 8. The advantage of it is allows you to add it when you need it. Most likely, if you're ever going to do this, it's probably going to be after you've already addressed the 7th and 8th grade issue. And in that case, you've already bonded for that building, 7th and 8th building, or whatever your solution is for that. And you're going to have to add this on top of that, which means this will result in a tax rate increase. There's no way to get around that if you decide to build additional facility space after you've already addressed the primary issue, which is 7th and 8th. We did meet with Kerry Vilma and ask him hypothetically if those are the options that you had in terms of the various parts and pieces to them, would you give us some rough ballpark idea of what some of those things might cost? And provided for the board and in the packet which I've made available. And this report I've given to Mr. Tyree, and you are very welcome, and I would encourage you to post it on your website so that anybody in the community can look at it and thoroughly examine, because there's a lot more detail in the report than we can possibly present this evening. But Mr. Velleman has provided some rough idea of the cost estimates for the various options. We have provided to the board and whatever planning committee there is what I call a rough estimator. We're not the only person that can come up with options. You all may come up with a different option. And what you've been given in the material is a tool that you can use so that you don't have to involve an architect right away and trying to come up with, at least if we were to think about doing this, how much might that cost? It gives you a way of coming up with some kind of dollar figure for some other options if you come up with some different options. One of the things that we hope that you will consider doing as soon as possible will be, and I think John will talk about this very quickly, is when you get serious about this, you really need to get an architect involved. And more importantly, you also need to get someone in terms of your financial advisor involved. And you are so fortunate, you probably have one of the most knowledgeable experts in the state of Indiana sitting on the school board. So he's the person that we go to ask. So you're very fortunate to have somebody like that on your school board. But that information is available to the board in terms of some of the cost estimates for the options. And John, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the financial information.
Well, as Dr. Eiler has indicated, there is a rough cost estimator included in your packet information, because you do need to have an idea of just what the rough numbers are. You could undertake a construction project between $0 and $33 million in hard construction costs, and I want to emphasize those are the hard costs, that there are soft costs that come in construction projects in addition to that, but the big dollar amount is your hard costs. You could spread those out over the next 20 years, and you'd be able to maintain a tax rate that's at or below your current tax rate. Now, that's assuming that your assessed value doesn't fluctuate wildly in the next 20 years, that it stays fairly stable, because if your assessed value changes, obviously that's going to impact your tax rate, and so the assumption is that that'll remain fairly low. Also, again, you will need architect's analysis to include specifics on a program. These are just rough estimates. When you meet with an architect, once you get to that point, you need to have your ed specs included, because depending on how you want to utilize the buildings and which buildings you're going to build, that certainly affects the square footage cost. The development is an additional cost. Architectural plans must be drawn, and then bids are secured, and right now, of course, right now the bidding market is reasonably good. Financing is good, but there's no way that I can predict what's going to happen in the next year or two in either of those arenas in terms of construction costs or financing. Once you get to that point, if that's what you are going to do, is move forward with a project, you would want to bring on a financial consultant. I would say that echo what Dr. Eiler says, that you certainly have the good fortune of having a local person that can help you in a great deal there. Some of the considerations also that you will need to undertake is, should you proceed more rapidly structuring the debt, only paying interest only with very little principal, you can move a project forward a little bit if that's what you want to do, if that's the way you want to structure your debt. Should you use some of your capital projects dollars and free that up to take care of some of your debt? Could you restructure some of your current bonds so that you can continue with a level tax rate and allow projects, again, to move forward at a little bit earlier date? And if the district were to consider a three-phase building program, should you consider shortening the term of the initial bond? So those are financial considerations, certainly come after you've made a decision as to how you want to move forward, which of the options you deem best. If any of those options you're going to pursue or multiple options, this is a bit of the process that you would take. After that, we'll turn it back over to Dr. Adams.
So in summary, it's our position that it's not unreasonable for the district to assume that you're going to have at least stable, or more likely, a limited amount of growth in the district. The data also suggests that there really is no capacity issue currently in grades K to 4, but you do have this issue about functional capacity of Jefferson. How many students are you going to allow at Jefferson because of the limitations of the cafeteria and the gymnasium? The projected enrollment at Riverside means that there may be a couple of periods of time during the next 10, 12 years where on a short-term basis, you might need to be creative in terms of what you do with that space. You might need to add some temporary classrooms for a year or two. You might need to think about whether or not you may leave a couple of classes in a different building. You may look at different grade level configurations a little bit. But Riverside is going to be tight for a couple of years, and so that's something you're going to have to give some thought to. The one thing that is clear is that Lincoln Junior High School exceeds the recommended building capacity during a number of years. And it appears to be the primary issue in your district. And like we talked about earlier, the good news is it doesn't appear that you need to look at closing school because of declining enrollment during the foreseeable future. There were a number of program needs, and program needs, while they sound, okay, so what's that all about, what do they need? They drive a lot of the cost of school construction because it's the nature of the space that often drives the cost of construction. So you've got to get a good handle on programmatically what do we want, what does the community say that we think represents the best educational experience for our kids, and that's got to be developed with educational specifications and working with architects to do that. One of the things you may want to consider from our perspective would be a three-phase plan. And the first phase would be looking at addressing the problems of grades 7 and 8. What are you going to do about grades 7 and 8? The second phase would be to address what are we going to do with grades K to 4, and then the third phase would be, okay, let's address grades 5, 6, and 9 through 12. Those would be your phases. Phase 2 and 3, if you think about, can we structure this so that every 15 to 17 years we take care of phase 1, 15, 17 years later, phase 2, 15, 17 years later, phase 3. that's kind of a way of phasing your facility plan. As John mentioned, you're in a position where you can take on a fair amount of construction costs, hard construction costs, over the next 20 years, and still maintain your tax rate or have it slightly below your existing tax rate. And that's obviously very important, that you try to maintain, and you're probably going to have to go with a referendum for a bond issue, because it will then be above it'll be exempt from the tax caps. And so you will probably be confronted with a referendum as one of the things that will result probably from any decision that you're likely to make. We also must share with the board, with our perception, having listened to the focus groups, that there is a really, really strong perception that buildings are just fine. School people have a very, very different viewpoint, and I think that you have a real need to try to conduct some educational efforts of a wider community, so that, just like these folks, in my understanding, they've gotten to see the bowels of the building. They understand some of the infrastructure issues. Everyone in the community needs to be brought to their level of understanding about what condition the buildings are in. And that's often through the process of a community-wide task force. You may want to consider doing that. And its purpose is to educate the public. The other perception that we have is, I think it's safe to say that they really think there's not any need to do anything, because there's a real commitment having been made that they're not going to do anything until after 2020. And so if you're going to do something in a certain time frame, that also is going to have to take some work on your part to educate the community as to why it is that you need to do something in advance of 2020. And given the condition of the buildings, there's probably some concerns that you need to, I think about moving in a more timely fashion. And the final point that we would make would be, if you are able to, when you go through and if you elect to say, okay, phase one is our 7th and 8th grade building, or meeting the needs of our 7th and 8th grade students, you can proceed with that, and maybe if you get lucky, you may be able to incorporate some of the most critical problems in phase 2 and 3 buildings as a part of the initial bond issue. If not, then it's imperative that you consider prioritizing those things in phase 2 and 3 buildings in your capital projects fund plan, and think about the possibility of issuing geo bonds in the amount of $2 million, which you have the ability to do in order to meet some of those critical needs in the phase 2 and phase 3 buildings. So that is our summary of our report. We hope that you will find the information that was provided to you helpful. It is intended to be a document that you as a board and the community can use as a part of whatever process you choose to follow in making a decision. And I hope that you will use some of the information in there to help you arrive at a decision which you as a local community think is in the best interest of your children in Plymouth. We've appreciated the opportunity to have studied this and present our findings to you, and would be glad to try to respond to some questions if you have some.
I just comment, Ed, John, and the focus groups, this information is extremely helpful. And needless to say, we've been looking at different options down the road, and I think this reinforces a lot of concerns that we had. I noticed on your color coding, though, I didn't see a red and white.
I deliberately avoided red and white because I figured that would be
I
the
thought maybe
choice.
that might lead to let us know where to locate that swimming pool. But it is very helpful. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions from the board? What, there's a lot to chew on here. And I can't say I'm too surprised by what's in the report. To Larry's point, it kind of reinforces some things that I think we had sense of. So really appreciate your efforts. And I think there's, and I was waiting for, the direction. You're not here to make decisions for us, but, I didn't see any of those options considered what we do with the pool. So I'm curious about what kind of feedback, if any, that from the group, or is that considered to be woven into any of those options, or that's off the table at this point?
That was not voted in one of the options, other than, that's stated.
You'd run out of colors with.
That's right.
We certainly recognize that's something that needs to be considered as well, and I don't think that's a CPF function at all. Are there members of and thank you all for your participation. I do want to have an opportunity, if there's anybody from the committee that wants to chime in, you can do it now or later, but really appreciate all of you being involved. This is going to be, no matter what route or what timing, it has to be a community effort. Anything that you all want to chime in or add to the report here this evening?
I have to say something. I was probably one of those community people when you drive by Lincoln. It looks beautiful from the outside, and I have been in it forever. And Dave took us around, and it's pretty frightening, the condition of the roofs and the additions and where they're joined together, and the mechanical areas of that school. It's in bad shape, and I think it's in need of attention sooner than later. And I don't mean just continue to patch together. One other comment I'd like to make on one chart you did about the ages of the buildings. I think you missed a couple of additions on the Plymouth High School. When I started there in 1966, they built, I believe, 4 additional classrooms to accommodate West School coming in. Larry, do you remember that? You were gone. Not you, Larry, the other Larry. He's an original too. And then I think they added maybe 4 more classrooms onto the east side for a couple science rooms in about 1968 or 9. So there's been
Could
at
be,
least
because we
2 more
got this out of the
fairly
city,
large
that's the information we
projects.
had, so it's very possible.
That's all.
Again,
I'm kind of curious about technology. Obviously, I believe that Plymouth is on the cutting edge of technology. It sounds like you do this all the time. So, number one, would you agree with that statement that our school system is probably ahead of the curve on that?
oh, absolutely.
So
That's one of the many things I would comment. I told the board that I think this is a wonderful school community. I have every reason to be proud of the school district.
So with that being said, the numbers for enrollment, which drive everything you said, seem to be pretty status quo. We don't see a large growth. And I look at, the economic side of things as well. You said businesses coming in. And I know we're really trying to grow the economy through bringing in business by being on the cutting edge like that. But it doesn't appear as if the numbers of enrollment take that into consideration because it's an unknown factor, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very possible with us being on the cutting edge and having things like this that people want because, you said it's going to drive you with the voucher. If our school system is wanted because of that technology, I would think that our enrollment numbers probably that you brought are a lot more conservative than what they probably will be. Would that be a fair assessment?
Perhaps. Because it's enrollment, the answer is
Well, technology changes all the time, and I know that, like every 3 years, you're supposed to change your computer because it's hard to keep up with technology. And so it's going to be hard to know those numbers because it's something new and adventurous and hasn't happened before. But I got to believe that that's going to drive the growth of the school system. And it also might be able to minimize class sizes because of the way technology works. And, we're seeing even in the business world where people can hold meetings without ever leaving their home. So, and you saw that this year with trying to make it a school day by having a technology day on a Saturday where kids can just log in and do their schoolwork from home. So I got to believe that there's going to be things outside the box that we haven't thought of or haven't done before that could actually help minimize classroom sizes and actual physical schools too because of technology. So So I didn't know how that was gonna play into, you're talking 15 to 17 years, 3 phases. 45 years down the road, there's gonna be a lot of changes because of technology. We're not gonna need the facilities that we have.
And again, it's important to bring up this technology because you are on the cutting edge in terms of instruction. I think that when we talk about the imperative of the educational specifications, this is exactly what we're talking about, because that will be a significant cost impact on and how the buildings are designed, and will have a substantial impact on the ultimate cost because of the nature of the space being built. So that's why it's imperative to develop educational specifications.
Can I ask a question just from a historical perspective? Your chart showing us pretty flat for the future years. Now, Plymouth being the gem with technology, does anyone have an answer? How has that trend gone, say, for the past 10 years? Or are we still flat? Because, I mean, if we're pretty flat from previous 10 years, the claim that being technology advanced is going to help hasn't proved itself out. So potentially it may be, I'm just asking, I don't know the historical.
Well, when did we implement the technology? Wasn't it just a year or two ago?
2010.
I think some of the evidence that you do have is, if you just relied solely upon the cohort survival ratio, you'd have 1310. This year you had 1350. Why do you have 40 more kids? It may well be because you're attracting more kids. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption to make. Somehow you have more students than you might otherwise have predicted. How many more? Don't know. And you also have this phenomenon called whether or not at some point in time another smaller district will be forced to merge. So I mean, you have so many unknowns. It's very difficult to predict.
But the one thing that does seem to reason is it's not going to go lower. It'd be hard to press the single.
I think that's safe. Unless you have a major employer with intent, which hopefully doesn't happen.
I mean, we do have the data. I don't have it. No, I'm just curious. I mean, the question just posed me to think what.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a correlation. There's certainly other factors that are going to influence that kind of make that correlation a little murky. With technology investment, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, what do we see in our enrollment? You can make some assumptions, but there's going to be other factors. I mean, the fact of the matter is, here in Indiana, it's ollie Otson free. I mean, it's open enrollment. And so not only what we're doing, I think, influences that, but also what are other folks around us doing is going to influence that as well. Like it or not, we're in a very competitive situation for students, and you've all seen it, I've seen it. You can drive down the road, you can see billboards, you can see ads in the paper, you can see ads on the TV, and we all know what that's about. It's chasing, I mean, every kid has a dollar sign associated with it. You hate to think in those terms, but that's part of the reality. So I think it's an interesting conundrum here of the business side. And I've been in this community a long time, and I know what the sentimental value is surrounding Lincoln. And I'm not putting my personal bias on the table or where I stand on yay or nay on that sentimental value. But I think you can look at 20 different options, let alone 5. But the reality is going to be focused around, I think, what people are willing to do with that facility, personally. And there's one of the comments that there's a perception about the year 2020. I think that's more than a perception. That was certainly part of our last building program, and when we were going through that process, the big wild card was how long can we stretch Lincoln out, and can we get to year 2020? And I think, at least personally, I knew that was a bit risky, given the status of. I mean, it was, if it's pushing 100 years here soon, it was 80 years, 90 years some time ago. But when we went down the path, and we all remember how involved that got here in our last building program, and I'm not evaluating that either, but it was involved. And we had multiple options that, if you remember, that considered how to deal with Lincoln that were left in the cutting on the floor for various reasons. So This gives us, in this, we're not going to, well, are we ready to vote on an option? I don't think so. There's going to be many more discussions, and this is not, I mean, this is part of the process. So again, thank you all for being part of that process, and please continue to do so, because we've got, and our focus, I think, in the last time, is not going to be any different than our focus in any future endeavor. What's the best thing to do for kids in our community? But it is what it is. The landscape is different, and we're going to have to think a little bit differently, not from technology to how our kids going to learn. We just saw here an example, a very brief example. You guys didn't have the opportunity to see what our 7th and 8th graders presented here this evening, but it wasn't what I was doing in 7th and 8th grade, I can tell you that. So a lot for us to consider, so appreciate all of your efforts as well.
Would make one final comment, and that is the dollars that are in there, that should be kept in terms of when you present whatever option it is that you're going to present in terms of that cost, it needs to be the maximum number of dollars. It may wind up being less than that, but you don't want to go out to the community and say, this is going to cost X number of dollars, and then it winds up being X plus Y $1 million. It once that number is publicly, it needs to be as large to make sure that it does cover what you anticipate doing. These are just some working numbers. They're not intended in any way, shape, or form to characterize the option that you wind up choosing. So I think that's an important point to make, so that is articulated in a fashion that the community understands the scope of the possible cost of the project. But again, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Can I ask how long this took to complete this report?
We started in October, last year. Again, thank you all.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Todd, one last question. In reality, let's say you all voted tonight, you're going to replace.
That's not reality.
I know it. In fantasy world, how long would a project like that take? You said tonight we're going to do it. By the time you got the architects involved, the financing, before you turn your first shovel of dirt, are you looking at 2 years, a year and a half, a year? Before you get started, and then construction time is another.
I don't want to answer your question with a question, but the assumption, I guess, in answering your question is how successful would it be in a referendum?
Right.
Because that would be a requirement. So,
say it all went smooth.
We are fancy. So here we are if we voted, we're not. If we were voting here this evening, and this is May of 2014, I would find it very difficult to appropriately go through a process to have something on a ballot for November. That I don't think is even reasonable. And I can't remember if there's a primary election next year or not. So these are all the kind of things that, I'm sorry, there is?
City election.
Is there? Okay. So you have to kind of think about those things. When is the appropriate, how much time? My experience, the time to go through the legal process, the architectural, should not be any greater than the time we spend with the community in terms of what solution are we considering, what education do we need to go through in terms of, you've seen the bowels of Lincoln, not very many people have. So there's an education process to all that. So I would reasonably suggest it would be no sooner than beginning construction because the other thing to consider is it's going to be a challenge for the board to authorize an architect to go full bore on anything until we know if the voters, you got to do some preliminary work. So even the earliest you would get to an election would be a year from now. Today is election day, right? So if that were to go smoothly, then the architect would need to get busy for no less than 6 or 9 months. Design, bidding, et cetera, another couple months for bidding. You're probably a year out before construction would even begin. So where did I just put us?
It's 2 years.
That's I'm in the spring of 16.
And then to complete a project that size?
2 years.
So you're looking at 4 years to move in, at least?
So that is to the school year of 1920, I think. Not the year 1920, but 1920.
That's where I was going. So if you wait till 2020, you're out to probably,
I understand.
2024 or 25.
And I think at least again, this is my perspective in terms of, and I was one of these in the focus group meetings that I'm going to be hard pressed to go against what I told the community was, in terms of what our objectives were. But, things change, so you have to be flexible. But part of that was consideration of debt management, tax rate management. So I think you bring up a good point. We have to think in terms of how long that process can take. And we saw that in our last program, that even though we said 2020, I mean, in order to affect that, because you don't want, again, personal opinion, I don't think you want your debt service tax rate to take a dive for a year or two as bonds are paid off and then try to bring it back. I don't think that's quite what the taxpayers appreciate. They may appreciate it going down for a year or two, but when you bring it back, that's nobody's going to remember what happened. So in order to kind of dovetail those things together, you have to kind of, to have a bond issued and become, under that scenario I just painted, we wouldn't have any tax impact because you really can't start payments until the buildings are done, typically, until 2020. So we're not too far away, I think, from what we were talking to the community about in terms of, because I think the expectation was, at least again my own personal viewpoint, that that was a significant project for our community. We're not going to come back with additional significant borrowing until we've addressed and paid for what we've already constructed. So that's just me. Thank you all.
Thank you.
More to come. Are we okay? Okay, moving right along. I'm sorry?
They don't have to stay now, do they?
I'm sorry? Oh, no. You're welcome
We're
to.
supposed to stay, is that what you're saying?
Yes, you have to. You must stay.
All right, well, we need coffee. We're staying, we need coffee, okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for coming.
Let's move along. Item 3.3, consider selections for curriculum content.
That's me. So, the state no longer has a prescribed adoption cycle, but in our school corporation, we have still continued to adopt curriculum materials on a 6-year cycle. This was the year for 7 through 12 to adopt curriculum resources for English language arts. So you have before there a list from both Plymouth High School and Lincoln Junior High School. We had a committee with parents and would ask the board to approve those decisions. Mr. Galt represented and led the junior high through that. Mr. Kaufman led the high school through their adoption as well too. So they're here to answer any questions on that.
I would so move.
Second.
It's on the table. We have a motion and a second. Are there questions? Anything you gentlemen want to add? Or? Look kind of bad. Larry's out of the room. But so can you give us a summary of the diary of Anne Frank?
While we're waiting for Larry, there is one thing in there I might mention. In there is a service called Turn It In. As you know, in the age of the internet, kids are easily able to plagiarize, copy and paste things from the internet, steal other people's work. Turn It In is a product that actually it'll review the work. It gives the kids feedback on language conventions and some other things, but it also scans for plagiarism and does a really good job of scanning for plagiarism when the kids submit their papers to there. So that's something unique that we've not done before.
Oh, there he is.
Waiting on me?
Yes.
Mr. Curtis. Larry, we're discussing the textbook adoption. We have a motion and a second. Just a couple of comments or clarifications. So unless you have questions that you think we're ready for a vote. We have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. One of our favorite times of the year, reviewing the handbook.
Mr. Boyer, come on up.
Sorry to make you wait.
So as you know, each year we take a look at our handbook, and each of the building levels makes the appropriate changes that need to be made. You recall last year in May when we were going over the changes to our handbook, Mr. Tyree made the suggestion that maybe in the future one day we could go to a corporation handbook as opposed to each school having their own. So in January, Mr. Olson and Mr. Hoppel, Mr. Delp and Mrs. McGuire and I began to meet and we reviewed our handbooks and we aligned them into one corporation handbook. Obviously the purpose was to create a unified handbook for our students and our parents, kind of a one place to go, so that we have a lot of families that have children in all of our buildings, and just kind of complicated to expect them to go through each of the handbooks. So we met regularly and we created a new handbook. We then gave teachers the opportunity to go through and make any suggestions for changes. And then we met with a parent and student committee to review so that all stakeholders have an opportunity to provide some feedback. And then, because our schools are unique in their own right, we do have an addendum section at the end for the elementaries, Riverside, Lincoln Junior High, the high school, and Widener School of Inquiry. So we're bringing this to you tonight for review and in hopes of distributing that to our students and parents for the beginning of 2014-2015. And Mr. Olson actually does want to talk a little bit about the addendum to the high school because they're a little bit more involved.
There's been some changes to some high school stuff we want to make sure you were aware of. So.
Before you get into that, Mr. Olson, I do have the general question. Going through this, and there's really no way I can make any comparison in a reasonable amount of time between the corporation-wide that we have here versus what we had individually. Is it truly kind of, you're going to touch on changes at the high school, were there any other changes, I guess, or is kind of a...
No, I mean, we really still have our 16 sections that touch on things from, the introduction that has the mission and the core values, the general information that talks about student rights. Then you got your health, your special ed, your student fees and charges, your personal property and academics. I mean, there were just a lot of redundancies within all of the different handbooks, so it really did make sense. It was a pretty smooth process to go through all there and get them aligned.
If anything, there were maybe some stylistic or language changes that have occurred as we put things together, or some elimination of a phrase or a word here or a sentence, but not anything structurally major. We were pretty consistent across the board is what we found.
So as we look at addendums for each, what would be major categories of difference between each of those?
Some of the things are just the nature of the different levels. For example, we talk about clubs and student organizations. Those are predominantly in the junior high and the high school. So when you look through, they have addendum sections that address how are we going to elect officers, how are we going to bring new clubs in, how are some things like that that aren't there. At the high school in particular, we have to spell out in the handbook, what do you need for credits? And currently we have 2 different systems until we get through next year's class that graduates.
We didn't add drug testing to the elementaries or anything?
We did not. Nothing like that, yeah. That's another perfect example. Or athletic code of conduct, things like that. That kind of fall into those. Because of the high school and some of the unique things that we do in terms of like having Wednesday school, nobody else has that. So we need to kind of explain that in the high school section, what that is.
And you'll notice that the elementary and Riverside Lincoln addendums are considerably shorter, and ours deal with things like recess guidelines, things of that nature.
I'll be interested to hear or see how this is received from a much shorter version, building by building, to something that's more comprehensive. And I can see people, if they take the time to look at it, appreciating that, especially if you have multiple kids at different levels. I can see others suggesting, why do I have so much? I just want to know what my building is or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see. Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, no problem. Some changes for the high school, and these are things that we brought in or added to the staff or student input, predominantly where they came from. In terms of academics, we have gone into having several college readiness programs over the last few years. And so we wanted to make sure that in the handbook, we're delineating out what are the different college readiness programs that we have. So what does it mean if you're taking an AP course? What does it mean if you're taking an ACP, Advanced College Project course, and what might be some differences there? With the Ivy Tech dual credit program, what classes are for that, and then what will it give you? And what is Ivy Tech going to do that's different from an ACP or again an AP? And then we're even getting into some situations where from Purdue we have Advanced Life Sciences. This is one class, but Purdue's the only one that we can get college credit for it. So we've partnered with Purdue. Our vocational courses, like what we're doing across the street over there at the former Service Center building, those are in there delineated out, and that was the teacher's suggestion. One, so that we can kind of market it a little bit in the handbook, but two, so that students knew what to expect going in, that this is not, an average course. You're going to be expected to do some extra things. We want to make sure they knew that going in from the forefront, and that they had, for parents, it's a handy way to be able to find that. So that was probably the major change we had. We had another change that came from staff on making the prom attire gender neutral. So instead of saying women or ladies must wear a dress, we just kind of say, here's expected prom attire. You can interpret it as you may want to interpret that. So if you're a girl and you're more comfortable wearing a suit, go ahead. If you're a guy and for some reason you're more comfortable wearing a dress, we're not going to cause an issue with that. Students then asked if we could take out the restriction on hats, tennis shoes, and flip-flops. And so we took those out based on student recommendations for those. And I thought, okay, who's going to go to a formal dance wearing tennis shoes? And yet my very own daughter bought and dressed for her first junior high dance this coming Friday and is wearing red Converse. I'm impressed she's wearing red, considering we live in Winona Lake. I was impressed by her choice of shoe color, not the rest of the things. So those were things on students. And then under student conduct, the teachers asked we underlies the phrase, no holding hands, hugging, etc. And so we did put that in. And then under tardies, we added, and we've done this already actually, a 3-tonal bell, or sorry, 4-tonal, I think it's 3 all the time, that rings about a minute before the tardy bell to kind of remind students once again, hey, let's go, head to class, get going, kind of give them a cue that you're running out of time, might need to pick up the pace a little bit. So we feel that it's been working pretty well in terms of getting them there and things like that. We do have one more change that we'll need to make, but we're not done with it. At the high school, we are currently in committee discussions and study to move from the current 12-point GPA system to a 4-point GPA system. And once that is completed, we'll come back to the board with that language at that point to add to the handbook. Any questions or concerns? Thank you.
Heard the presentation or explanation. Are there any, let's have a motion. Is there a motion?
Do we have to? It's a review.
No, it's a review.
Like I said, this is for review. That's what happens when my computer goes down. Hold on a second.
We'll
Any
vote on
questions?
it
I'm sorry.
Another time, right? We'll
I'm sorry?
have Another time to vote on.
We've not voted on it?
Yeah, but this is.
No, I know, but I
this is
mean,
not-
another time we will vote on
I think they're just.
No, it's just review.
No,
Oh, it's
this
just
is, this is,
review.
yeah, this is for our.
Okay,
review
good.
question. I'm not the only one, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Seems like we vote
Item 3.5, consider K through 4 textbook fees.
And that's me. The good news is our K-4 textbook fees have decreased, not increased. What happened was there was a certain software that was included in the textbook fees called learning.com, and it was a keyboarding software to find out that the students and teachers are not utilizing that, are not finding it a good practice to use for keyboarding. And so what they have been doing is they found free software which is wonderful. So that $6 that was added to all of the K-4 textbooks was removed because we substituted with free. And I think that's good news for our parents especially. Also in second grade, they removed the writing cursive workbook. Yes, we are still doing cursive. But again, we found free items, and the lab has good practice with paper, pencil, and we found out it was cheaper to do it by copying paper than what it was to purchase that whole entire workbook, which was not utilized fully. So again, the textbook fee was reduced in second grade with that. So I think parents are going to be pleased. Any questions?
It's good news.
That is good news.
I would so move that we approve the textbook fees, K-4.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 3.6, consider contract for learning management system.
So this is mine. I left some notes there, but so we're in the development phase of creating some blended learning opportunities for our kids and also some online opportunities. Jim has some classes in development even for next year where kids will take some classes online. We think that providing the online experience for our kids is important to prepare them for college and careers, because we know that when they go to college, whether it be Ball State or wherever, likely they're going to take some online classes, and we want to give them that experience. In order to do that, we need a robust learning management system that can facilitate that. So if you've ever taken an online class, you might be familiar with Blackboard. There are others out there. We currently use Moodle at the high school mainly. Moodle is a software that is really developed by a community, but it lacks many of the features that are needed to teach an online class or a true blended class. So we're asking the board to approve a contract with Canvas. I will say that after we went through this process, the Indiana University adopted Canvas as their learning management system as well too. So I feel good that this will be preparing our kids for what they're going to find in college. So it is, the first year would be $8.76 a student. And then after that, Bruce and I have made contact with Canvas and their E-rate specialist and plan to file for some reimbursement through E-rate after that. Entertain questions?
Well, you've heard the recommendation, or is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Motion second. Questions?
Is this effective for next year?
Yes.
That will be included in the textbook rental.
No, we actually have money in technology set aside in CPF to pay for that for next year. Yep. So it would not affect textbook rental. And then after that, we would hope to mostly pay for it through E-rate.
Great.
So I'm confused. What is the 876 though?
That would be if you broke it out per student. It's just what basically what it's going to cost us. We're going to provide it for all students, 3,700 students.
Yeah, so that's not a fee they're paying.
No.
You're
It's a cost.
Just broke it out by what it was.
Just so you would know.
You just didn't want to tell us what the total number was?
Right. That's how they quote it to us typically, so I'm speaking
I
their
work with
language.
numbers. I know what the game is.
Yeah.
It's not much more.
That's probably what salespeople quote that number to.
It's like a meal at McDonald's. It's like, no, it's not.
It does integrate. One thing I would like to add to that is that it integrates with PowerSchool, which is our student information system. And so anytime any updates are made to class rosters, right now it's really a pain. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's a pain for teachers to manage those rosters. That roster management will automatically happen for teachers. So.
We also might include Project Lead the Way has adopted it as well.
I'm sorry?
Project Lead the Way has adopted Canvas as their learning management program.
And we'll have Project Lead the Way K through 12, so that will help out.
Very good. Any other questions? We have a motion is second, correct? Yes. Here, if there are no further questions, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention. 3.7, temporary advancement resolution.
I don't know how I got this, but Candy nominated me to give this information, so I hope you don't have questions. Or we may be calling Candy. According to the estimated cash flows for the bus replacement fund, we will be short approximately $66,000 in the bus replacement fund. We will recover those funds in December of 2014 when we receive the second installment of the property tax payments. In the meantime, Candy would like to request permission to temporarily transfer the funds from the rainy day fund into the bus replacement fund to cover the shortfall. Candy felt this was the least time-consuming and least expensive solution considering the amount of funds involved. This transfer would then be reversed in December of 2014 as required by law in order to pay back the rainy day fund. So she would ask for you to consider that temporarily advanced resolution, please.
So moved. We have a motion.
Second.
Second.
What was the amount again?
66,000.
I think translation, we get, this is an issue we deal with all the time because we get monies basically twice a year, property tax monies, and this is a tax-supported fund. When she's talking about least expensive solution, we could go out and do a tax warrant, to borrow. In essence, what we're doing here is borrowing from ourselves. So that's least expensive. Last time I knew, our rainy day fund was a couple million, I believe. We're north of that, so I would agree with her assessment here. So, that motion, and again, required, and we'll have to pay it back, and this will all be settled by 12/31 when we get our December draw. So I have motion and second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are on to, the motion carries, we are on to superintendent remarks.
And
Who
I
gets
get
the honor?
those tonight.
Okay.
Commitment to students. For the fourth year in a row, sorry about that, Webster Elementary has once again been named a 4-star school by the Indiana Department of Ed. So I'd like to congratulate Carrie along with Webster's staff. In addition, I'd like to congratulate the high school. They were recently recognized by U.S. News and World Report as the 12th best high school in Indiana and the silver medalist. So congratulations.
And Jim, tell me if I interpreted that list incorrectly, but I'm going to go top 10 as far as public high schools. Is that
You are correct, and one of only a few north of Indianapolis.
correct? Great job. Thank you.
Okay, on to carrying. Griffin Nate, Riverside student, was featured on WNDU on Monday. I don't know if many of you saw him, for his lip dub to help raise money for Relay for Life, and that was an outstanding project that he did, and it featured many of our Riverside, well, all of our Riverside staff and students, especially Stephen and Jenny. I remember seeing them right front and center when I was watching the news that morning.
Walking backwards.
Yeah, walking backwards, yes. What carrying is Webster Elementary students and staff also recently raised funds to help St. Jude's and Riley's Children's Hospital. So congratulations to that staff. Again, high expectations. There's quite a few, and the music department has recently received several awards. The choral and crimson both received gold, and the counterpoint girls group received silver. The orchestra brought home gold with a near perfect score. The symphonic and wind ensemble bands earned record scores at the ISSMA organizational contest. Both bands received gold. The marching band recently had 8 students appointed to the Indiana All-Star Band to perform at the Indy 500. So that's cool. Team player. Sorry, it takes a while. There we go. Yes, if you haven't noticed, the PHS softball team held their first ever teacher appreciation night. Ms. Church made sure that she put teachers first that night. Each player wrote a personal letter inviting a teacher they feel is making a difference in their lives, and each teacher received a team poster, a signed softball, a decal, and pizza. So that was a neat event for them. Integrity. The top 5% of the 2014 graduating class were recognized at Christo's last month. The PHS Orchestra provided the music, thanks to the students, teachers, and parents for their hard work and dedication. And a special thanks to Mr. John Oliver from U.S. Granules, who has sponsored this event for the past 3 years. And lastly, enjoyment. Several PHS students recently attended the JD Journalism at Ball State. 2 PHS students were recognized with an excellent rating. This past weekend, PHS presented the spring musical Peter Pan. Over 100 students and staff put in many hours to make this year's show a success. And the Music Boosters sponsored a chili dinner fundraiser before the Friday night showing. Upcoming events and meetings. Teacher Appreciation Dinner. It is this Thursday. Can't believe it's just around the corner. From 4 to 6 at Red Rock, so I hope to see all of you then. PHS Jazz Cafe is holding its event on Saturday, May 10th, and doors open at 6. Senior Awards, Friday, May 16th. I can't believe that's just around the corner at PHS Gymnasium at 8:15 a.m. June 3rd, we will have our executive session at 6 p.m. as well as the regular board meeting at 7 p.m. And that is what I have. So you might want to mark those on your calendars. Any questions for me or for Dan?
What's the date of graduation?
June 13th, Friday, 7:30.
Friday the 13th?
Friday the 13th. That's not good.
You had to. You just had to.
And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Michelle.
No, thank you.
Turn it back, are there anybody in the audience that would like to address any of the items for this evening? Harry, I know we went over this very quickly about four-star school, but that's just an awesome accomplishment, so anything you want to offer or say?
She hates this part.
No, I mean, it is 4 years in a row, just be on that list once.
That just rolls out the time, just 4 years. Expectations, setting expectations really high. Anything else from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. We're right at that 2 hours.
2 hours.